But what I came here today to just say thanks to you. You're the generation that raised us. You know, so the standards, the high expectations, the opportunities, the good school systems. I'm a pure product of that. Plus your tax dollars. I'm a public school graduate, a West Point graduate, and West Point paid for my MIT 2 years at MIT so that I would be qualified to be a professor of aerospace engineering for West Point. Before we get too far from high school, so before we get too far from high school, that's my wife Debbie over there, but she's really my girlfriend from 1974 for, what is that, 49 and a half years? Yeah, 49 and a half years. She stuck with me through West Point, so we dated 6 years because you can't be married at West Point. And we got married, and then we had 4 kids, and she raised them. I was so busy, I can't really claim much credit for raising them. But it turned out to be good kids, and our oldest graduated from West Point. That's Jessica, 2010. And she's a combat Apache attack helicopter pilot, saw combat in Afghanistan in 2013. And our middle two said, my 2 daughters, they're pretty smart, and they said, Dad, we know what they do up there at West Point. That's pretty tough. We saw what they're doing with Jessica, and we're too smart for that. So they went to the University of Virginia. And they both graduated with high honors. And the second daughter, Amanda, she also got a law degree from William and Mary, so she's an intellectual property lawyer. So back to what you said, you passed on the knowledge to me we pass the knowledge to them, it continues. And then, you know, our third daughter, Amelia, she did biological sciences at University of Virginia. And our youngest, our son, who was born outside the gate at Johnson Space Center, and he was the New Year's baby in Houston for 1994. He's a captain in the Army. He's a M1 tank company commander. He had combat time in Syria, defending the coalition airfield as a lieutenant in 2018. You might recall the Russian mercenary battalion, the Wagner group, and those guys. The First Armored Division defended the coalition airfield, and the Wagner group came across in a coordinated attack, and 70% of the Wagner group never made it back to their home lines because the defense of the coalition held, and they pretty much got annihilated out in no man's land. So, and that's good because that's our only son, you know. So, so he's got a little combat time. He's from the class of 2016, and all four of them graduated from AI DuPont High School across the street. And he graduated from West Point 2016, armor officer and all this progression. And like I said, combat in Syria was the 1st Armored Division. Now he's in the 1st Cav Division. He just got back in July from 6 months in Poland, where he commanded a tank company. They had sent all the light divisions quickly to Poland to guard against the Russians coming further. And then they replaced them with the heavy divisions, you know, like the 1st Cav Division. And they fully replaced them, and they spent 6 months there. So that's how the defense is going. So we're a family. We do our duty. We passed on your lessons you taught us. We taught them. And they don't have any kids yet. I think they will definitely be able to pass it on to another generation. So your knowledge and what you've done for us continues. So. And that's what I wanted to come today and say thanks, because it's really, without you, you know, we wouldn't be who we are. So, now special thanks to not only the generation, but to the veterans. You know, I do a couple of things charitable. We came back, I brought the family back to Delaware in 2006, but then I worked another 12 years for the Boeing Company. So I did 20 years with the Army, 22 years with the Boeing Company, and then when I was 59 2/3, magic number, right? 59 2/3, and the Boeing stock hit its all-time high, I just found that I didn't have to work anymore. And I was pretty good at goofing off, you know, in high school, but I had to get back to it. There was a 42-year gap at goofing off. So Debbie and I are good at goofing off. We've been goofing off for about 6 years now. Right? We've traveled all over Europe. We travel around the United States. We go visit the kids, go help them move in and move out. You know, but while we're here, I'm also the president of the West Point Society of the Delmarva Peninsula. So what we do is there's about 212 graduates on the peninsula from Port Deposit all the way to, you know, the Bay Bridge tunnel. So I'm their leader. I take care of them. But more than that, there are lots of widows. Now we call them surviving spouses, right? Because I was in the first class with women. So there are surviving spouses that aren't women, right? But for the most part, they are, because it's the class, one as old as the, you know, widow of the class of 38, plenty from 50s and 60s. And this tends that our men are predeceasing their spouses, and we're trying to fill the gap by making sure that they stay connected, and we stay integrated, connected, communicated. So I had a group of them. Debbie and I took a group to Buckley's Tavern for lunch last Thursday, and I'm moving it around the Delmarva Peninsula. So trying to get close to where the surviving spouses are. We'll have lunch, and it's great. We had a lady from the class of 58 whose husband was in the Air Force, and he passed away a number of years ago. But when she told me about him, I looked at all these details, and all of a sudden, I'm working on his nomination for the Delaware Aviation Hall of Fame. You know, I've also met a couple of people around. Terry Preeve is one of them. I'm never off duty, and I was over at Walgreens in Greenville, and I saw that United States Naval Academy class of 58 license plate, and I was on him. I knew who he was. And he told me he was an aviator and stuff, and then I gotta go work the details, but I can feel a nomination coming up here. The last Saturday in October, we have an induction dinner and a banquet, and we induct 6 new Delaware aviators every year. So it's a subcategory of veterans, but it's the aviation from all services, and even if you're not in the service, we've got private pilots, airline pilots, people that there are some real good candidates. That there's a guy named Larry Kelly down in Georgetown. He's an honorary Doolittle Raider. He wears Jimmy Doolittle's watch that he flew over Tokyo with, because he became such a good Doolittle Raider with his flying his own B-25, doing the missing man formation on all their funerals, that when they all passed away, the last Doolittle Raider alive gave it to him. Right. So he wore it to the banquet, and it's stuff like that. He made his money in pharmaceuticals, and then he took that money and got into aviation, and specifically the Doolittle Raiders, and he's been doing it for a few decades. People like that. So we put him in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, so the Aviation Hall of Fame, if you've got anybody from any aviation walk of life that you think is worthy to be nominated, nominate them. Anybody can nominate them. DAHF, Delaware Aviation Hall of Fame.org. And I'm the chairman of the selection committee. That doesn't mean I prepare it all, set it all up, and present them all. But we all vote. There's 12 of us that vote, and so I can't really put anybody in. I can just put them in the truthful, most honest light to make sure they get proper consideration. And the 12 trustees vote them in. And also, it might be qualified and fully qualified and very honorable, but you got to be in the top 6, because we only put 6 in every year. So there are people waiting, right? Now, I'm trying real hard to get Vietnam guys in now, because most of the Korean War veterans have passed away. And so we put in a couple of Vietnam helicopter pilots this year. One had a Silver Star, one had a Distinguished Flying Cross. And so if you know, I'm working really hard we did 4 live recipients and 2 posthumous. It would be better to catch these guys and recognize them properly before they're posthumous, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And I mentioned on the West Point Society of Delmarva, trying to get them all to take care of each other. The Army is a tough place, and you're up or out, and we West Point guys, and I'm sure like the Naval Academy guys do, we take care of our people. So we take care of soldiers, and that's what we do. But who takes care of us? Well, our spouse does, unless they predecease us or something. But so I'm trying to take better care of them, and it's working, especially even their surviving spouses. So I'll keep you posted. The other thing I was going to do is make more of a commitment to you. I'm here, I'm the local guy, and I got 212 graduates. There's a lot of good stuff, good deeds we can do. And, we're not going to say it all today during this meeting. I'd be glad to talk to any of you at any time, especially the veterans, but not only the veterans. And if there's anything we can do for you, and especially if you've got any kind of Department of Defense issues, or you didn't get your last award, or you need somebody, I've got, there are these 212 graduates. There's a few of them that are judges. There are a few of them that are, lawyers. There's a few of them that, they have all the different doctors, and so not saying I coordinate your medical stuff for you, but, these guys are all, they're all good people. They're not all from Delaware. They're all here now. They might have all started somewhere else. They're all good people. I'll vouch for them, and we've got bandwidth to help people. So I'm starting with you. Deb, anything you want to say? No?
Glad to be here.
50 years, almost. Anybody have any questions or anything else you wanted me to talk about? I can tell you an entertaining, historically important story that nobody else knows. Would you like that?
Sure.
All right. Okay, so, Second World War, greatest generation, atomic bomb, and we won, and the Cold War starts, right? A lot of these guys in here, some of them, I'm sure, Korean War vintage, Cold War, Vietnam. I graduated from high school in 1976. Saigon fell in April of 75. So I was a post-Vietnam total volunteer. And they laughed at me when I tried to register for the draft. Probably don't know this. The high school class of 74 registered and had a lottery. High school class of 75 registered, no lottery. High school class of 76, they laughed at us if you tried to register. But then 3 years later, while I was on active duty at West Point, they tracked me down because they wanted to know where I was. I mean, I've been on active duty for 3 years, and they couldn't find me. So that was a kind of funny thing. But But to tell the story, so you know the 80s, and we rebuilt, we had returned to patriotism, rebuilt the Army in the 80s, started taking it apart when the Soviet Union fell, when December of 89, when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union imploded. All good stuff, right? We defeated the evil empire of the Soviet Union, so what was the consequence? Well, the consequence was the peace dividend. We needed 40% fewer soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine, right? So we took the 600 ship Navy down to something less than 300. We took the Army from 18 divisions down to 10 divisions, and so we needed 40% fewer people. So a lot of the cadets that I taught at West Point in the class of 90, they got released in 93. They didn't do their 5-year minimum service obligation because the peace dividend was letting them go. The class of 94, they got let go as captains. I was a major. They came to us in August of 95 and said, we need 40, your lieutenant colonel's board is a year away. We need 40% fewer lieutenant colonels. We're going to take volunteers because we don't know who wants to stay and who wants to go. And so the first 200 volunteers have 15 years or more commissioned service. You can volunteer immediately, August of 95, all the way out to July 1st of 96. See, I was launching space shuttles and having a good time, and I wasn't really trying to get out. So I told them, well, I'll go in July 1st of 96 because I got 3 more space shuttles to launch this year, right? And so I did, and that was a great time. But I joined Boeing, and I walked right into the International Space Station. So I was 4 years a space shuttle guy. I was a real space guy. I was a test pilot. Did a lot of cool things with them and supported 32 missions over that 4 years. But Boeing needed space guys. They had a lot of airplane guys, but didn't have a lot of space guys. And so I sent the resume into Boeing. They hired me in Seattle and boomeranged it back to Houston. And then I became the tip of the spear on the International Space Station program. So you might remember when President Reagan proposed Space Station Freedom. Well, when President Clinton was in, they totally repackaged it and made it International Space Station Alpha. And then they dropped the Alpha later, and it was just International Space Station. So what the idea was, and this is the Cold War part where it was really kind of got weird, but so these guys who've been standing off, the Soviets, who've been standing off for decades over in Germany up against them, we all of a sudden, they're our partner. And the partnership was, they had a lot of important scientists, nuclear, aerospace, rocket scientists. The idea was to give them something important and gainful and peaceful to do so they don't sell their wares around the world, helping other people develop ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons and things. So this is the historic part that's kind of cool. So my first one, I said in the little information that they sent out, my first job was, I was the manager, the leader, really not manager, the leader of the first American mission. The first American mission was Unity. It was US Node 1. It included the Node Structural Test Article and all the common berthing mechanism and all the hatches for all the space station for all the pieces, everybody else's pieces. And we qualified them, tested them, had a successful job, and I delivered it to Florida in a C5C. There's only 2 C5Cs, they're space cargo modified. All the rest of them are C5B. So I was the Boeing guy in there that took Unity to the Cape. It was called US Node 1, and then when you get there, they have a band, a little bigger than our band here today, but not any better. And they play some music, and they have a speech, and they say, the name is Unity, so it gets its name when it arrives at Cape Kennedy in Florida, at Kennedy Space Center. But the reason I'm telling you this is that they told me to stay there, take the kids out of school, move to Florida, and we did. And then go build, go launch that first vehicle. And then about a month later, they called back and said, hey, come back to Huntsville. The U.S. laboratory module, which is the biggest, most expensive, most critical one, is like 10 months behind, and we need you back here leading that one. So they put me in charge. They sent me back to Huntsville, put the kids back in the same school. Nobody knew that they were really gone because it's summertime. And then I led the assembly, integration, test, and delivery of the U.S. lab module. And what got weird about it is it's very complicated, very expensive, and very difficult to build. And I ran that 24/7 for about 18 months, and I had to pick up a half a month every month, for 18 months to put it 9 months back and get it on plan, get it back where it needed to be, so we weren't holding up the International Space Station, including the Russians, right? So it was like a space race, but instead of running the space race and Sputnik with your enemy, you're running space race and Sputnik with your partner, and so. Which is only a few years before would not have been possible to ever meet these guys. But wanted to tell you, so I went about 8 months into it. It recovered 4 months, and the Russian press kept saying that the Americans are not waiting on the Russians, or the International Space Station's not waiting on the Russians. They're waiting on the U.S. laboratory module because it's not ready and it won't be done on time, right? And so then the American side, all the press releases from the American side were, oh, we can't possibly launch until the Russian FGB Zarya Flight 1R is on orbit. And so it's got to be on orbit, and then we're going to launch Unity, the one I took to the Cape earlier, right? And so the Americans wouldn't launch it until the Russians got on orbit, and the Russians kept saying, so it was this kind of Americans, Russians, right? At a very high level. So they scheduled a visit from the Russians. And I haven't told this story a lot, and a lot of people might not ever have heard it, and I don't even think they record it. But they authorized a visit for these two members of a Politburo to come visit, and to visit me in Huntsville while we were picking up 2 weeks, half a month per month, as we worked 24/7. So that's how he did it. You know, you can do 4.2 weeks worth of work every week, right? So you just got to work 168 hours a week, not 40, right? So, and we did, and it was very fun, and it was very challenging, and we did a fantastic job. Nothing was contracted the last 30 years or the last 60 if you wanted to, you know, because we overdid, okay? That we overdid the seals, we overdid the hatches, we overdid the common berthing mechanisms. Everything's got reliability and corrosion prevention to last twice as long as what we contracted for. But where it gets funny is, so these three Russians come visit me, and they want to meet me alone, and they want to meet me by the flight article, and they want to talk about it. And there's, you know, ITAR, export compliance, you know, what else? Trade secrets. Spacecraft are something that you don't generally talk about, especially not with your previous adversary that's just become your partner. So I put them up in a glass room, kept them about some distance away, so that, you know, and we had a good talk. But during this conversation, I showed them schedules, I showed them pictures, I showed them how we would recovered 5 months in the first 10 months, half month per month for 10 months, and that how we were recovering schedule, and we'll be down there on a certain date at this time, and you need to be there with Zarya too. So their eyes got big, and their jaws got dropped, and these three guys, it was the first one, he was a general in the Red Army before he got out and retired and became a member of the Politburo, like Congress, right? And then the other guy was a submarine commander in the Russian Navy, and then he got out, or he retired, and he became he became a member of the Politburo. The third guy, I never figured out who he was, and I never figured out what he did, but he was kind of like the political officer. And I'm not going to say he was former KGB or FSB, but it certainly felt like that, right? And his jaw dropped. But then they hit me with one of these questions to try to see if I was friend or foe. Like it said, well, I bet you blame this whole space station delay on the Russians, right? I said, no. I know, I'm just telling you the facts. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just focusing on what I have to do, and I'm doing my job, and it's going to be there, and I'm telling you when, and I suggest you guys do whatever you have to do to meet up with that date. And so, and they left. All of a sudden, the bottles broke out, and we were drinking Stolichnaya, and I brought a bottle home to Debbie. You know, I think what to do, burn a hole in the countertop or something. That stuff is, that's, you know, vodka, that very high proof, straight from Russia in the diplomatic pouch vodka, right? But so that story kind of unknown out there. But what I knew, I saw their faces and everything, but I didn't know what they were going to write, and I didn't care. I was really busy. I just had a big, you know. So the Americans keep saying that, you know, week goes by, 2 weeks go by, the Americans are still staying. We're waiting on the Russian functional cargo block, Zarya. And but the comeback, the Russians came back, and their punchline or their headline was, no, you're not waiting on us and the Russians and Zarya. You're waiting on the software from Houston. So you see how we escaped. It's like that's what the point, you know. It's like a wrestling move. Escape. We escaped being blamed worldwide by the Russians for holding up the International Space Station. So I don't want to bore you. I've got like 42 years worth of cool stories like that. I'll come back and we'll talk anytime you want. But I thought that one was kind of relevant, and I don't go out and speak a lot. I'm not a politician. You know, 3 engineering degrees, aeronautics and astronautics, and I come out for you. So.
Thank you.